I'm Rachel Wilson, 34, and I never thought I'd be celebrating my 10th wedding anniversary by serving my husband divorce papers hidden inside a vintage watch box, the same box he'd been eyeing for months at that luxury store downtown. The look on James's face when he opened it, expecting the Hamilton timepiece he'd been hinting about since Christmas, is something I'll never forget, not after what he said to me at our anniversary dinner in front of his entire family. Honestly, Rachel, marrying you was the biggest mistake of my life. You're a complete disgrace. I still remember the stunned silence that fell over the restaurant. If you're watching this and have ever experienced that moment when your entire world shatters, let me know where you're from in the comments. This family drama is just beginning, so hit that like button and subscribe if you want to hear how I finally stood up to my controlling husband and his toxic family after 10 years of manipulation. Trust me, the revenge was worth the wait. James and I met at a charity gala 7 years ago. I was working as an event coordinator, managing the silent auction for a local children's hospital. He was there representing Morgan Financial Group, his family's prestigious wealth management firm. I still remember how he looked that night in his perfectly tailored tuxedo, confidently bidding on a weekend getaway package I'd spent weeks securing for the auction. When he won the package, he immediately asked if I would join him. It was forward and inappropriate, but something about his charm made me give him my number instead. One coffee date led to dinner, and suddenly we were seeing each other every night. James Morgan was everything I thought I wanted: successful, charismatic, and from a world so different from my middle-class upbringing in Ohio. 6 months later, we were married at the Morgan family estate. It was a whirlwind romance that made all my friends jealous. Our wedding was featured in a local luxury magazine, with Catherine Morgan, James's mother, proudly telling the reporter how her son had finally found someone suitable, though from humble beginnings. I should have seen that red flag waving right in my face. Our life together looked perfect from the outside. We bought a gorgeous colonial in Willow Creek Estates, the most exclusive neighborhood in town. James insisted on handling all the financial aspects, though I contributed my entire inheritance from my grandmother to the down payment. "You're not used to managing these sums," he'd explained. "Best leave it to me." And I did, grateful that he was taking care of us. We traveled twice a year to exotic locations, always documented perfectly for Instagram and Facebook. The Morgans exploring Santorini or anniversary getaway to Bora Bora. I spent hours getting the lighting right for those photos, making sure I looked thin enough, sophisticated enough to be a Morgan. What no one saw was how James would critique every photo, making me delete ones where I looked too heavy or unsophisticated. No one knew that each vacation came with rules about what I could eat, drink, or wear. Morgans have standards, he'd remind me. To support James's career advancement, I left my job as a marketing executive at a growing tech company. We relocated across the country for his big opportunity at the family firm. I gave up a promotion I'd worked toward for 3 years. "You don't need to work anymore," James told me. "A Morgan wife focuses on social connections and charity work." So I did that instead, joining the right committees and volunteering for the right causes. Catherine never approved of me despite my efforts. At Sunday dinners, she would casually mention the women James dated before me. "Remember Caroline Winters? Her father just became a state senator. Such a lovely family." Or she'd correct my table manners with a tight smile. "Rachel dear, at formal dinners we use the outermost silverware first." But how would you know that? The subtle signs of trouble appeared early, but I ignored them. When James checked our joint credit card statement line by line, questioning every purchase I made, I told myself he was just financially responsible. When he installed a home security system that tracked when doors opened and closed, I convinced myself it was for our safety. When he started criticizing my intelligence during dinner parties, laughing it off as just teasing, I smiled along, not wanting to be too sensitive. Last year's anniversary should have been my wake-up call. James gifted me an expensive platinum and diamond bracelet from Tiffany. When I developed a painful rash after wearing it, he became irritated rather than concerned. I specifically asked for platinum because it's hypoallergenic, he insisted, even though I'd told him multiple times about my metal sensitivities. When I showed him the angry red welts on my wrist, he sighed in exasperation. You're always so difficult to please, Rachel. Do you know how many women would kill for that bracelet? I returned it the next day and bought a simple silver one instead. James never noticed the switch. And I told myself that's what marriage was: compromise and understanding. But I was the only one compromising, the only one trying to understand. As our 10th anniversary approached, I was determined to make it special, to somehow recapture the connection we once had. Or maybe I was just desperate to prove to myself that our marriage wasn't as hollow as it felt. I spent weeks planning the perfect celebration, researching restaurants and gifts that would meet the Morgan standard. James had been dropping hints about a vintage Hamilton watch for months. He would casually open the browser on his laptop to show me the exact model whenever I was nearby. "The craftsmanship is impeccable," he'd say. "They don't make them like this anymore." I recognized the routine. This was how James told me what to buy him. The watch was exorbitantly priced at $4,800, but I was determined to get it for him. I started saving from my personal allowance, the modest amount James deposited into my separate account each month for frivolous expenses. I cut corners everywhere I could, skipping lunches with the few friends I still had, using makeup samples instead of buying new products, and selling some designer clothes James had bought me but I rarely wore. After 2 months, I had saved enough. I visited Carrington and Sons, the high-end jewelry store downtown where James had shown me the watch. Mr. Carrington himself helped me, clearly recognizing the Morgan name on my credit card. "Your husband has excellent taste," he remarked, as he carefully placed the Hamilton in a beautiful vintage leather box. "This piece has quite a history." For our dinner, I secured a reservation at Le Bistro, the most exclusive restaurant in the city. The Morgan family were regulars there, with their preferred table always available. I called 6 weeks in advance to ensure everything would be perfect. The day before our anniversary, I was at Nordstrom, anxiously searching for a dress that would meet James's impossible standards. Not too revealing, but not too conservative. Sophisticated, but not trying too hard. I settled on an elegant navy blue silk dress that cost more than my first car. That evening, while James was in the shower, his phone chimed with a text. I normally wouldn't look, but the preview caught my eye. "Can't wait to see you tomorrow. Don't forget to bring." The sender was someone named Amanda. My stomach knotted as I quickly picked up his phone. There were hundreds of messages between them, going back months. I only had time to scan a few before hearing the shower turn off. "Thanks for the earrings. They're beautiful," one message from Amanda read. Another, "Miss you already. These business trips are never long enough." When James came downstairs, I casually asked, "Who's Amanda?" I saw a text pop up. He didn't miss a beat. "New client, high net worth individual. Why are you checking my phone?" I wasn't checking. The message preview showed up on your screen. James's expression hardened. "You know how I feel about privacy, Rachel. This paranoia is exactly why I can't share details about my clients with you. You're too emotionally unstable." "I'm not paranoid," I defended myself. "I just saw a name I didn't recognize." "This is exactly the problem," James sighed dramatically. "You're so insecure about your position that you create problems where none exist. It's exhausting." The conversation ended there, as they always did, with me apologizing for overreacting and James magnanimously forgiving my emotional nature. But this time, a seed of doubt had been firmly planted. The next morning, I called my best friend Megan for coffee. She was one of the few connections I'd maintained despite James' subtle disapproval of her alternative lifestyle as a single woman focused on her career. "I don't like how he speaks to you," Megan said after I recounted our conversation about Amanda. "That's textbook gaslighting, Rach. He's under a lot of pressure at work." I found myself making excuses. "And tomorrow's our anniversary. I'm sure things will improve." Megan gave me a look I couldn't quite interpret. "How long have we known each other? 15 years? I've watched you shrink yourself for this man for a decade." The Rachel I knew would never let someone speak to her that way. Her words stung because they held truth. I had changed, molded myself to fit into James's world, and somehow lost myself in the process. As our anniversary arrived, my anxiety was through the roof. I spent hours getting ready, carefully applying makeup, styling my hair, and putting on the new dress. The Hamilton watch was wrapped in silver paper inside its vintage box, ready to be presented at dinner. I kept thinking about Amanda and those texts. I kept replaying Megan's words in my head, but I pushed it all aside. Tonight was about celebrating 10 years together. Tonight would change things. It had to. Le Bistro was everything you'd expect from a restaurant where dinner for two easily costs $500. Crystal chandeliers, plush velvet chairs, and waitstaff that appeared and disappeared like well-trained ghosts. James was already seated when I arrived, nursing what looked like his second scotch. I was only 5 minutes late. "You're late," he confirmed my suspicion, checking his current watch ostentatiously. "Traffic was terrible," I apologized, leaning in to kiss his cheek. He turned slightly, so my lips barely grazed his skin. That's when I noticed we weren't alone. At our table for two, there were now 6 place settings. James's parents, Catherine and Robert, and his brother William with his wife Stephanie were all making their way back from what appeared to be a trip to the bar. I didn't realize we were having company, I whispered to James, trying to keep the confusion from my voice. "I told you last week," James replied tersely. "The whole family wanted to celebrate with us. Don't make a scene." I had absolutely no recollection of this conversation, but I'd learned long ago that challenging James's version of reality only led to arguments I couldn't win. So I smiled warmly as Catherine air-kissed both my cheeks, her signature Chanel No. 5 overwhelming my senses. "Rachel, darling, that dress is almost appropriate for an occasion like this," she said, her eyes critically assessing every inch of me. "Thank you for joining us," I replied, ignoring the backhanded compliment. Robert, James's father, at least had the grace to seem genuinely pleased to see me. He gave me a warm handshake and a kind smile. "Happy anniversary, Rachel. 10 years is quite an accomplishment." William and Stephanie offered polite congratulations, though I could see Stephanie's discomfort. She had married into the Morgan family 5 years after me, and we shared a silent understanding about the challenges that entailed. The evening proceeded with excruciating slowness. Catherine dominated the conversation with stories about the Morgan family history and their recent country club victories. "James' golf handicap has improved tremendously," she boasted, "and he's being considered for the club president position next year." "That's wonderful," I said, trying to catch James's eye. This was news to me. "Of course, they're looking for couples with the right image," Catherine continued, her gaze sliding meaningfully to me, "preferably with children, to represent family values." There it was, the monthly reminder of my failure to produce Morgan heirs. After years of trying, we had learned I had medical issues that made conception difficult. James had refused to consider adoption. "Morgans pass down their bloodline," he'd stated firmly, closing the conversation permanently. "We're focusing on our careers right now," James said smoothly, signaling for another scotch. His fourth of the evening. 10 years is a long time to focus on careers," Catherine remarked. "Stephanie is already expecting their second." Stephanie looked down at her plate, clearly uncomfortable being used as a comparison. As our entrees arrived, I attempted to steer the conversation toward happier topics. "I was thinking we might plan a trip for our anniversary," I suggested. "Maybe back to Bermuda, where we honeymooned." James scoffed. "With my schedule? Impossible. Some of us have responsibilities, Rachel." The table fell awkwardly silent. Even Catherine seemed taken aback by his tone. "I have a special gift for you," I said quietly, desperate to salvage something from this disaster. "I think you'll really love it." "Is it that watch?" William asked innocently. "James hasn't stopped talking about it for months." James shot his brother a warning look, then turned to me with an artificially bright smile. "You shouldn't have gotten me anything expensive, Rachel. It's not like you earn your own money." The comment hit like a slap. I had earned my own money, once. I'd been successful before I gave it all up for him. As dessert was served, James ordered his 5th scotch. His cheeks were flushed, his words slightly slurred. I noticed Robert watching him with concern. "Perhaps you've had enough, son," Robert suggested gently. "I'll decide when I've had enough," James snapped. Then, turning to me with unexpected venom, he said, "Just like I'll decide when I've had enough of this marriage." The table went completely silent. Diners at nearby tables paused their conversations, sensing the drama unfolding. "James," Robert warned, "this is neither the time nor the place." But James was past caring. He leaned forward, eyes locked on mine. "Honestly, Rachel, marrying you was the biggest mistake of my life. You're a complete disgrace." The words hung in the air like poison gas. Catherine's expression wasn't shocked. It was satisfied. William and Stephanie stared at their plates. Robert's face flushed with anger, though I couldn't tell if it was directed at his son or the public embarrassment. I felt as if I'd been plunged into ice water. 10 years of marriage, reduced to those cruel words in front of his entire family. I stood up, my legs shaking. "Excuse me," I managed to say before heading toward the bathroom. Once safely locked in a stall, I called Megan, tears streaming down my face. "He said what?" Megan gasped when I told her. "In front of everyone?" "Rachel, this isn't just disrespectful, it's emotional abuse." "I don't know what to do," I whispered, aware of other women entering the bathroom. "Come to my place tonight," Megan offered immediately. "Don't go home with him." "I can't just leave," I said, though I wasn't sure why not. "At least get a separate ride home," Megan insisted. "Text me when you're safe." When I returned to the table, they were discussing me as if I weren't there. "She's just not Morgan material," Catherine was saying. "I told you from the beginning, James." "Mother, please," William interjected, noticing my return. I sat down silently, my appetite gone, my gift for James still in my purse. No one acknowledged the tears evident on my face or the scene that had just occurred. The check came, Robert paid it, and we all walked out in uncomfortable silence. James didn't speak a single word to me during the ride home. When we arrived, he went straight to the guest room and closed the door. There would be no 10th anniversary celebration. There would be no giving of gifts. But as I sat alone in our living room, I realized there might be something else entirely waiting for us both. If you've ever reached that breaking point where you suddenly see your relationship with crystal clarity, you know exactly what I was feeling. The rage, the hurt, but most importantly, the certainty that things had to change. I couldn't sleep that night. James's words kept replaying in my mind, alongside Catherine's satisfied expression. 10 years of trying to fit into their world, of shrinking myself to meet their expectations. And this was what I had to show for it. A husband who called me a disgrace in public and in-laws who thought I wasn't good enough. Around 3 a.m., I went downstairs to make some tea. James's laptop sat on the kitchen counter, still open. He never left it unlocked. In 10 years of marriage, he had never once shared his passwords with me, claiming client confidentiality. But tonight, perhaps in his drunken state, he had forgotten to log out. I hesitated only briefly before sitting down at the counter. This was my marriage, my life. I deserved to know the truth about Amanda. His email was open, and I quickly searched for Amanda. Hundreds of results appeared, going back over 2 years. My hands trembled as I clicked on the first one. Meeting pushed to 2 p.m. Can't wait to see you. Wear that black thing I like. This was no client relationship. I kept reading, my stomach knotting tighter with each message. There were intimate details, plans for rendezvous during business trips, complaints about me. Wife being difficult again. Can't wait until I don't have to deal with her anymore. Amanda Prescott was James's assistant at Morgan Financial. 28 years old, according to her email signature. I found photos James had sent her from business conferences. The two of them smiling intimately at hotel bars in Chicago, New York, San Francisco. Places he had gone alone, supposedly for work. I downloaded and printed key emails, my printer humming quietly in the office across the hall. I was operating on autopilot, my body knowing what to do while my mind struggled to process the betrayal. Then I found the financial records. James had been transferring money from our joint accounts to a separate one in his name only. Small amounts at first, but increasing over the past 6 months. The most recent transfer had been yesterday for $25,000. I remembered 3 specific occasions when I'd had suspicions. The time I found a long blonde hair on his suit jacket, and he convinced me it must have been from his client, Deborah Jenkins. The weekend he claimed to be at a financial conference in Denver, but when I called the hotel, they had no record of him. The lipstick smudge on his collar that he said happened when Margaret from accounting tripped and fell against him at an office party. Each time, he had made me feel crazy for suspecting anything. Each time, I had apologized for not trusting him. Each time, he had been lying. I continued searching, finding a draft email to a realtor about selling our house. "I'll be ready to list in approximately 3 months. Once the divorce is finalized," he had written. "My wife doesn't know yet." 3 months. He had been planning to divorce me for at least that long, while I had been saving for his anniversary gift and planning our special dinner. The most devastating discovery came in a text conversation James had saved to his cloud storage. In it, he and Amanda discussed their future together. James: "Once the divorce is final, we can stop hiding." Amanda: "What about the company policy against employee relationships?" James: "Mother has agreed to waive it. She likes you much better than Rachel anyway." Amanda: "Poor Rachel. Do you think she suspects anything?" James: "Not a chance. Too stupid to see what's right in front of her. Have you seen how she dresses? Like she's still shopping at mall stores in Ohio." Amanda: "At least you'll be free soon." 3 more months of playing husband to that frumpy little mouse. Catherine had known. She had not only known about the affair but had encouraged it, had probably been pushing for it since she first decided I wasn't Morgan material. I printed everything, my hands shaking with rage and betrayal. When the printer ran out of paper, I replaced it mechanically, continuing my documentation. By 6 a.m., I had a substantial file of evidence. I carefully placed it in a folder and hid it in my craft supplies, the one place James never looked. I heard him stirring upstairs, probably with a hangover from his Scotch binge. I quickly closed his laptop and returned to our bedroom, pretending to be asleep when he passed by on his way to the shower. As the water ran, I texted Megan, "Need to see you today. Emergency." Her response was immediate. "My place, lunch, 12:30. I waited until James left for work, without a word about last night's disaster, before I broke down completely. 10 years of my life with a man who could so callously betray me, mock me, plan to discard me. 10 years of trying to be good enough for people who had decided from the start that I never would be. But beneath the grief, another emotion was forming. Something harder, colder, more determined. Something that would not bend or break again. If you've ever discovered someone's true colors after years of being deceived, you know that moment when the pain transforms into clarity. The moment when you realize it's time to fight back. I'd love to hear in the comments if you've experienced something similar and how you handled that pivotal moment in your life. I called in sick to my part-time job at the local art gallery. The owner, Diana, was understanding. "Take all the time you need, Rachel. You sound terrible." I did sound terrible. My voice was raw from crying. My thoughts scattered from lack of sleep. But by the time I arrived at Megan's apartment, something had shifted inside me. I wasn't just sad anymore. I was angry. Megan opened her door, took one look at my face, and pulled me into a fierce hug. "Tell me everything," she said, leading me to her couch. I handed her the folder of evidence instead of speaking. She read through it silently, her expression darkening with each page. "That absolute bastard," she finally said, looking up at me. "Rachel, this is. I don't even have words." "I need your honesty right now," I said, my voice steadier than I expected. "Did you know? About Amanda?" Megan's face fell, guilt washing over her features. "I saw them together once, at Riverview Restaurant in Westfield. They were intimate. Holding hands across the table, him kissing her palm. I wanted to tell you, but I didn't know how. I was afraid you wouldn't believe me. She was right. I probably wouldn't have believed her. James would have explained it away, and I would have accepted his explanation because the alternative was too painful to consider." "What are you going to do?" Megan asked. "I'm going to divorce him," I said, the words both terrifying and liberating. "But I need to be smart about it. He's been planning this for months, moving money, preparing to leave me with nothing. I need to protect myself." Megan nodded firmly. "My cousin Lisa is a divorce attorney. Specializes in high-conflict cases. Let me call her." Lisa Carter agreed to see me that same afternoon. Her office was in a converted Victorian house downtown, warm and inviting, despite the serious nature of her work. She reviewed my evidence with professional detachment, occasionally making notes. "You've done well gathering this information," she said when she finished. "Many clients come to me with suspicions but no proof. You've given me a lot to work with." "What do I do now?" I asked. "First, we need to protect your financial interests. James has been diverting assets, which is illegal during a divorce proceeding. But we need to act quickly before more disappears." She leaned forward. "Do you have any money he doesn't know about? Any way to support yourself in the short term?" I thought about the small emergency fund I kept hidden in an old makeup bag. $2,000 saved from birthday checks and the occasional cash gift from Robert. Not much, but something. "A little," I admitted. "Not enough for long." Lisa nodded. "Here's what we'll do. First, open a new bank account at a different bank. Today, transfer your emergency fund there. Start gathering essential documents: birth certificate, social security card, marriage license, tax returns, property deeds. Make copies and keep them somewhere safe, outside your home." She continued outlining steps. Document valuable assets in the home, photograph jewelry and art, download financial statements before James could alter or hide them. "What about the house?" I asked. "My inheritance is in that house. We'll file for an emergency injunction to prevent him from selling any major assets," Lisa assured me. "And based on this evidence of financial misconduct, we have grounds to request a forensic accountant." As I left her office, I felt a strange mix of terror and resolve. My marriage was over, but perhaps my life was just beginning. That evening, I discreetly removed important documents from our home safe, using the combination I'd seen James input countless times. I photographed valuable items throughout the house, being careful to return everything exactly as it was. The next morning, I opened a new account at First National Bank, transferring my emergency fund and setting up electronic statements only. I purchased a prepaid phone that James couldn't track and stored it in my glove compartment. James had been monitoring my regular phone for years. I'd discovered the tracking app accidentally once and confronted him. "It's for your safety," he'd claimed. "What if something happened to you?" I'd accepted this explanation, as I had accepted so many others. What I needed now was leverage. The financial evidence was strong, but I suspected the Morgans would use their considerable influence to minimize the damage. I needed someone on the inside, someone whose moral compass might override family loyalty. Robert Morgan had always been kind to me. Unlike Catherine, he had welcomed me into the family, defended me at dinner parties when James or Catherine made cutting remarks. And I knew he valued integrity above all else. It was the cornerstone of his business, philosophy, and personal code. I called his private line, the one Catherine didn't know about, which he had given me years ago. "For family emergencies," he'd said, "sometimes Catherine can be difficult." "Rachel?" He sounded surprised. "Is everything all right?" "No, Robert, it isn't. I need to see you. Alone. It's important." He agreed to meet me at a coffee shop in a neighboring town, away from the Morgan social circle's prying eyes. When I showed him the evidence of James's affair and financial misconduct, his face aged 10 years before my eyes. "I knew he was unhappy," Robert said quietly. "But this isn't how I raised him." "Did you know about Amanda?" I asked. "No," he said firmly. And I believed him. "Catherine handles the hiring at the firm. I've been semi-retired for 2 years now." He sighed heavily. "I should have paid more attention." "I'm filing for divorce," I told him. "I wanted you to know why." Robert nodded slowly. "I understand. And I'm deeply sorry, Rachel. You deserved better from this family." He hesitated, then added, "What do you need from me?" His question surprised me. I had expected him to defend James, to try to protect the Morgan name. "I need the truth," I said finally. "When this gets ugly, and Catherine starts spinning her version of events, I need someone who will speak the truth." Robert looked conflicted, torn between family loyalty and his personal integrity. Finally, he nodded. "I can do that, and I'll make sure you're treated fairly in the settlement. It's the least I can do." As we parted, he added, James has an anniversary gift planned for you. A redo dinner, at home. This Saturday. I hadn't expected that. After the disaster at Le Bistro, I assumed our anniversary would go unmarked. Why would he do that? I asked. Robert looked uncomfortable. I believe he regrets his public outburst. The timing was unfortunate for his plans. I understood immediately. James needed to keep up appearances, to maintain the facade of our marriage a little longer while he finalized his exit strategy. This redo dinner wasn't for me. It was for him, to ease his conscience or perhaps to throw me off the scent. It was also the perfect opportunity for my plan. Over the next few days, I prepared meticulously, following Lisa's advice. I secured a small apartment with Megan's help, paying 3 months' rent in advance. I contacted Victoria Chen, my former boss, about potential job opportunities, and was surprised by her enthusiastic response. I've been hoping you'd reach out, Rachel. We have an opening in marketing that would be perfect for you. Meanwhile, James was suddenly attentive, bringing home flowers and suggesting weekend plans. He never mentioned the scene at Le Bistro or his cruel words. In his mind, perhaps, they had never happened. I thought we could have a special dinner Saturday, he suggested on Thursday night. Just the two of us. To properly celebrate our anniversary. That sounds lovely, I replied. The lie coming easily. I'll cook your favorites. He smiled, pleased with my compliance, unaware that everything had changed. For 2 weeks, I maintained the perfect illusion of normalcy. I prepared James's favorite meals, listened attentively to his work stories, and never mentioned the anniversary dinner disaster or his mysterious client, Amanda. The day after our argument, James had offered a half-hearted apology. I may have overreacted at dinner, he said, not meeting my eyes. There was a misunderstanding. A misunderstanding? I repeated, keeping my voice neutral despite the rage bubbling beneath the surface. Yes. You clearly didn't understand the pressure I'm under at work. He sighed dramatically. And I shouldn't have discussed it in front of the family. It was inappropriate. Not once did he address calling me a disgrace or saying our marriage was a mistake. Not once did he actually apologize for his words or behavior. But I nodded and accepted his non-apology, playing the role of understanding wife one last time. Behind the scenes, I was working diligently with Lisa to prepare my divorce filing. The evidence of financial misconduct was substantial, and Lisa was confident we had a strong case for an equitable division of assets despite James's attempts to hide money. The judge assigned to your case is Henderson. Lisa told me during one of our meetings. She has zero tolerance for financial shenanigans during divorce proceedings. James, meanwhile, had become suspiciously attentive. He brought home flowers twice, suggested we take a weekend trip to the vineyard to reconnect, and even complimented my appearance one morning, something he hadn't done in years. I discovered the reason for his sudden attentiveness when I checked his calendar while he was in the shower. Amanda would be attending a business training in Chicago that weekend. His renewed interest in me coincided perfectly with her absence. The realization made me physically ill. I continued gathering and securing important documents: birth certificate, social security card, insurance policies, tax returns, investment statements. I photographed everything of value in our home, from the artwork James had insisted we buy to the jewelry he'd given me over the years. I reconnected with Victoria Chen over coffee, carefully explaining my situation without revealing too much. I may be looking for work soon, I told her. I'd appreciate any opportunities you might know of. Victoria, my former boss and mentor, didn't ask for details, but her eyes were knowing. We actually have an opening in our marketing department, she said. The salary isn't what you were making before, but it's a start. I'll take it, I said immediately, nearly crying with relief. Financial independence was the first step toward freedom. With Megan's help, I found a small but clean one-bedroom apartment in a safe neighborhood across town. I paid 3 months' rent in advance, using money from my emergency fund, ensuring I would have a place to go after everything fell apart. Throughout this time, Robert provided invaluable information about James's business dealings. There have been some irregularities at the firm, he confided during one of our clandestine meetings. Nothing illegal, but ethically questionable. James has been pushing investment products with high commissions but poor client returns. This information didn't surprise me, but it did provide additional leverage. The Morgan Financial Group's reputation was built on ethical investment practices and client trust. If word got out that James was prioritizing commissions over client interests, it could damage the firm significantly. Catherine called me midweek, her voice syrupy sweet. "Rachel, darling, I just wanted to check in after our little dinner. James says you're planning a special evening at home for your anniversary redo." "Yes, I'm cooking his favorites," I replied neutrally. "How lovely. You know, despite everything, we do consider you family, Rachel." Her voice took on a concerned tone. "James mentioned you've seemed distracted lately. Is everything all right?" She was fishing for information, trying to determine if I suspected anything about James's plans to leave me. I almost laughed at the transparency of her concern. "Everything's fine, Catherine. Just busy planning our special evening." "Well, do let me know if you need anything," she said, clearly disappointed by my lack of revelations. As Saturday approached, I finalized every detail of my plan. The divorce papers were prepared and waiting in my purse. I had arranged for a locksmith to change the locks on my new apartment that afternoon, ensuring James couldn't access it even if he discovered the address. Lisa had warned me that James might become volatile when served with divorce papers. "Men like your husband are used to being in control," she explained. "When that control is threatened, they can react unpredictably." With this in mind, I installed a recording app on my phone, ready to document any concerning behavior. I also arranged for Robert to arrive at a specific time, knowing James would be less likely to lose control with his father present. On Saturday morning, I went grocery shopping for our special dinner, buying all of James's favorites: filet mignon, truffle mashed potatoes, asparagus with hollandaise sauce. For dessert, chocolate soufflé, the recipe I had perfected over years of Morgan family dinners. I spent hours in the kitchen, preparing everything meticulously. I set the table with our best china, crystal, and silver. I selected the wine James preferred, a ridiculously expensive Cabernet from a small French vineyard that Catherine had introduced us to. As I worked, I thought about the version of myself that had entered this marriage 10 years ago. Young, ambitious, in love with a man who showed me a carefully crafted image of himself. That Rachel couldn't have imagined standing where I was now, plotting the end of her marriage while preparing a final anniversary dinner. At 5 p.m., I went upstairs to get ready, choosing the emerald green dress James had once said made my eyes look beautiful. I styled my hair the way he preferred, applied makeup carefully, and even wore the pearl necklace his parents had given me for Christmas 2 years ago. Every detail was designed to present the image of a wife still invested in her marriage, still oblivious to her husband's betrayal. The vintage watch box sat on the entry table, wrapped in silver paper with a simple bow. Inside were not the divorce papers themselves, but a letter informing James that he was being served, along with a summary of the evidence I had collected. The actual legal documents would come later, through official channels, but this would be his first notification that his carefully laid plans had been discovered. At 6:30, I heard James's key in the lock. He called out as he entered, "Something smells amazing." I took a deep breath, straightened my shoulders, and stepped into the role of devoted wife one final time. James walked in with a bouquet of roses, his smile practiced and perfect. He was dressed impeccably in the charcoal gray suit I had bought him last Christmas, his Morgan Financial tie clip gleaming under our entryway lights. "You look beautiful," he said, kissing my cheek lightly. His cologne, the expensive one he only wore for special occasions, enveloped me as he handed me the flowers. "Thank you," I replied, accepting both the compliment and the roses with a smile that didn't reach my eyes. "Dinner's almost ready. Would you like a drink?" "Scotch. Neat," he said, loosening his tie as he walked toward the living room. "It's been a hell of a day." I arranged the roses in a crystal vase, noting that they were the exact same bouquet he always bought when he felt guilty about something. Red roses, exactly 1 dozen, from the florist near his office. No thought, no personalization, just the standard apology flowers that could be ordered by his assistant with a single phone call. I brought him his scotch, then returned to the kitchen to put the finishing touches on dinner. Through the pass-through window, I could see him checking his phone, smiling slightly at what I assumed was a message from Amanda. The sight no longer hurt me. It only reinforced my resolve. "Dinner's ready," I called, bringing the perfectly seared steaks to the dining room. James sat at the head of the table, as he always did, surveying the spread with approval. "This looks incredible," he said, unfolding his napkin. "You've outdone yourself." "It's a special occasion," I replied, pouring the Cabernet into his glass. 10 years deserves a proper celebration. As we ate, James talked about work, about the new clients he had secured, about the club president position he was likely to get. He didn't ask a single question about my day, my thoughts, or my feelings. It was a perfect microcosm of our entire marriage. James centered, Rachel peripheral. "I've been thinking," he said, cutting into his steak with precision, "we should plan a trip. Maybe the Amalfi Coast in September. We've never been to Italy together." September, 3 months from now. By then, according to his secret emails to the realtor, our house would be sold and our divorce finalized. Yet here he sat, planning a trip he had no intention of taking with me. "That sounds wonderful," I lied, refilling his wineglass. "I've always wanted to see Italy. Mother and father went last year. They recommended a fantastic villa in Positano." He continued describing the imaginary trip in detail, painting a picture of a future that would never exist. I nodded and smiled, playing along with this final act of deception. All the while, the watchbox sat on the entry table, waiting. After dinner, James helped clear the dishes, an unusual gesture that further confirmed his guilty conscience. As I served the chocolate soufflé, he disappeared briefly, returning with a small, gift-wrapped box. "For you," he said, placing it beside my dessert plate. "Happy anniversary, Rachel." I opened it carefully, revealing a pair of diamond stud earrings nestled in black velvet. They were beautiful, expensive, and almost identical to a pair I had seen in the photos James had sent to Amanda. Had he bought them as a set? One for the wife? One for the mistress? "They're beautiful," I said, removing them from the box. "Would you help me put them on?" He stood behind me, his fingers brushing my neck as he removed my current earrings and replaced them with the diamonds. I wondered if he had performed the same intimate gesture with Amanda when giving her the matching pair. "Perfect," he murmured, his hands resting on my shoulders. "They suit you." "I have something for you, too," I said, standing up. "Let me get it." I retrieved the silver-wrapped box from the entry table, my heart pounding but my hands steady. This was the moment everything would change. There would be no going back. "I hope you like it," I said, handing him the package as we moved to the living room. James's eyes lit up with genuine excitement as he took the box. He recognized the shape immediately. The distinctive, vintage leather case from Carrington & Sons. "Rachel," he breathed, his fingers tracing the silver wrapping paper. "You didn't." "Open it," I encouraged, sitting across from him, my phone recording in my pocket. He tore the paper eagerly, revealing the worn leather watchbox with its brass clasp. "It's the Hamilton," he said, a rare note of true happiness in his voice. "I can't believe you remembered." I remembered everything. Every slight, every lie, every moment of gaslighting and manipulation. 10 years of memories, crystal clear in my mind. James opened the box reverently, then froze. Instead of the vintage Hamilton watch, he found a letter on our personal stationery. His eyes darted to me in confusion, then back to the letter as he began to read. I watched his expression change as the words sank in. Confusion gave way to shock, then anger, then a calculated blankness I recognized as his crisis management face. "What is this?" he asked, his voice dangerously quiet. "Exactly what it looks like," I replied calmly. "I know about Amanda. I know about the money you've been moving. I know about your plans to sell our house and leave me with nothing." James stared at me for a long moment, then laughed. It was a cold, dismissive sound that sent chills down my spine despite my preparation. "This is ridiculous," he said, tossing the letter onto the coffee table. "You've clearly lost your mind, Rachel. Amanda is a colleague. Nothing more. I have the emails, James. The texts. The photos. I kept my voice steady. I know Catherine has been aware of the affair. I know you've been planning to divorce me for at least 3 months. His expression darkened. You went through my private communications? That's illegal, Rachel. Invasion of privacy. No court will accept that evidence. Actually, they will, I countered. Since you used our joint funds to purchase the devices and pay for the accounts, and since you left your computer unlocked in our shared home, I had legal access to that information. My attorney has confirmed this. James stood abruptly, his face flushed with anger. Your attorney? Who the hell have you been talking to? Lisa Carter. The name had an immediate effect. Lisa's reputation as a fierce divorce attorney was well known in our social circle. You stupid bitch, James hissed, advancing toward me. Do you have any idea what you've done? The embarrassment this will cause my family? My career? I stood my ground, though my heart was racing. Don't come any closer, James. I'm recording this conversation. He stopped, his hands clenched into fists. No one will believe you over me. I'm a Morgan. You're nobody. I have evidence of financial misconduct, adultery, and now verbal abuse, I said steadily. And I'm not the only one who knows. Your father has seen the evidence too. That stopped him cold. My father? You went to my father with this? He deserved to know what was happening in his company. How you've been prioritizing commissions over client interests. How you hired your mistress as your assistant against company policy. James's face went from red to white. You're bluffing. He'll be here in about 5 minutes, I said, checking my watch. I thought it would be best to have a witness for this conversation, given your tendency toward emotional outbursts. As if on cue, the doorbell rang. James looked from me to the door, his carefully constructed world visibly crumbling around him. This isn't over, he threatened, his voice low. You have no idea who you're dealing with. Actually, I replied, for the first time in 10 years, I know exactly who I'm dealing with. I moved past him to answer the door, revealing Robert Morgan standing on our doorstep, his expression grim. Dad, James said, his voice shifting immediately to a more reasonable tone. This is a misunderstanding. Rachel has some wild ideas. Enough, James, Robert interrupted, stepping into the house. I've seen the evidence. All of it. The confrontation that followed was everything I had anticipated and feared. James cycled through denial, anger, bargaining, and finally desperate accusations. She's lying, he insisted to his father. She's mentally unstable. Has been for years. Ask Mother. Your mother isn't here, Robert replied coldly. And I've already spoken with Amanda Prescott. This was news to me. I looked at Robert in surprise. She confirmed everything, Robert continued. After I showed her the email exchanges, she admitted to the affair. She's been placed on administrative leave pending a full investigation. James paled further. You had no right, he sputtered. The firm is mine to run now. You're retired. I'm chairman of the board, Robert corrected. And you've violated multiple company policies, not to mention my personal trust. James turned to me, his expression ugly. You planned this. You manipulative. James. Robert's voice cut like a whip. One more word and you'll regret it more than you already do. In the tense silence that followed, I gathered my purse and the small overnight bag I had hidden in the coat closet earlier that day. I'll be staying elsewhere tonight, I informed them both. My attorney will be in touch tomorrow regarding next steps. Where do you think you're going? James demanded. This is my house. Actually, I corrected him. It's our house. Purchased partly with my inheritance. And according to the emergency injunction my attorney filed this afternoon, neither of us can sell or dispose of any marital assets until the divorce is finalized. I walked to the door, then turned back one last time. Oh, and James? I kept the Hamilton. Consider it compensation for 10 years of putting up with you and your family. As I walked out the door toward my new life, I heard Robert say to his son, We need to talk about your future at Morgan Financial. Or lack thereof. It wasn't until I reached my car that the magnitude of what I had just done hit me. 10 years of marriage, ended in a single evening. 10 years of trying to be someone I wasn't, of shrinking myself to fit into the Morgan mold. of ignoring red flags and accepting unacceptable behavior. I started the engine with shaking hands, but by the time I pulled away from the house that had never truly been my home, a strange sense of calm had settled over me. For the first time in a decade, I was driving toward my own future, not one dictated by James or the Morgan family expectations. My phone buzzed with a text from Megan. "Did you do it? Are you okay?" I couldn't respond while driving, but I smiled at her concern. I wasn't okay, not yet. But for the first time in years, I could see a path forward to being okay again. And that was enough for tonight. The next 3 hours in that house were unlike anything I could have imagined. What had started as a controlled confrontation quickly escalated into a full Morgan family meltdown. After my departure, James apparently called Catherine in a panic. She arrived 20 minutes later, bursting through the front door in designer loungewear, her face flushed with anger. I know this because Megan lived just 3 houses down from Mrs. Abernathy, our elderly neighbor with insomnia who saw everything and reported it all to Megan the next morning. According to Mrs. Abernathy, Catherine's voice could be heard all the way from her front porch. "What have you done, James?" she demanded as she entered. "Robert, what is going on?" I wasn't there to witness what happened next, but Robert recounted it to me later, during one of our unexpected post-divorce coffee meetings. "Catherine, your son has been having an affair with his assistant," Robert had told her bluntly. "He's also been moving company and personal funds around in preparation for divorcing Rachel." Catherine had initially dismissed this as ridiculous and blamed me for poisoning Robert against their son. But when Robert produced copies of the emails and financial records I had provided, her reaction shifted. "You knew about this affair, didn't you?" Robert had asked his wife of 42 years. Catherine's hesitation was all the confirmation he needed. "How long?" Robert demanded. "It doesn't matter," Catherine had replied defensively. "Amanda is a much better match for James. She understands our world. Rachel never did. So you encouraged our son to cheat on his wife? To plan to leave her destitute?" Robert's voice had risen with each question. "Is that the value system we built this family on?" Meanwhile, James had been frantically calling Amanda, who wasn't answering. He had then begun texting other family members, trying to rally support. But as the evidence of his behavior spread, allies were hard to come by. William arrived shortly after Catherine, having received a cryptic text from his brother. According to Robert, William had taken one look at the evidence and turned to James in disgust. "You're going to destroy this family's reputation," William had said. "Do you have any idea what this will do to the firm if it gets out?" The family implosion reached its climax when James, desperate for some leverage, blurted out, "Amanda's pregnant." The room had gone silent. Catherine had clutched her chest in shock. Robert had stared at his son in disbelief. William had simply walked out, slamming the door behind him. 3 months, James had added defiantly. "She's 3 months pregnant with my child." Catherine had recovered first. "This can't get out," she insisted. "The scandal would destroy us." "Robert, we need to handle this quietly." But Robert, to his credit, had stood firm. "There will be no cover-up," he declared. "James will face the consequences of his actions, both personally and professionally." "What does that mean?" James had demanded. "It means you're suspended from Morgan Financial, effective immediately," Robert announced. "The board will be informed of your misconduct at an emergency meeting tomorrow." "You can't do that," James had shouted. "I've brought in more new clients than anyone in the firm's history." By pushing inappropriate investment products with high commissions, Robert countered. "That stops now." James had then threatened to go public with supposedly damaging information about the firm's practices, a last desperate attempt at leverage that only served to deepen his father's resolve. As their argument escalated, Catherine had apparently suffered what she dramatically described as heart palpitations and had to be helped to the couch. The family drama had continued well into the night, with various threats, accusations, and revelations that would forever alter the Morgan family dynamic. I learned most of this the next morning when I met with Lisa to discuss next steps. She had already received calls from James's hastily retained attorney, attempting to negotiate terms before the divorce filing became public. "He's panicking," Lisa observed, with professional detachment. "Good. That works in our favor." What James didn't know was that I had no intention of going public with his affair or financial misconduct. I wasn't interested in scandal or revenge, only in securing what was rightfully mine and moving on with my life. The days that followed were a blur of legal meetings, document signings, and emotional processing. James made one attempt to contact me directly, showing up at the gallery where I worked part-time. Diana, my boss, had immediately called security. "You don't look well, James," she had told him coolly. "Perhaps you should go home before I call the police." He had left without seeing me, but the encounter rattled me. I changed my phone number that day and asked Victoria to expedite my hiring process at her firm. A week after our confrontation, I met Robert for coffee at a small cafe far from Morgan haunts. He looked older, the lines around his eyes deeper than before. "I've removed James from his position," he told me without preamble. The board agreed unanimously after reviewing the evidence of his unethical investment practices. "I'm sorry," I said, and meant it. Despite everything, I knew how much the family business meant to Robert. "Don't be. I should have done it years ago." He sipped his coffee thoughtfully. "Catherine and I are taking some time apart." This surprised me. The Morgans had always presented themselves as the perfect couple, the foundation of their dynasty. "She's staying with her sister in Connecticut," Robert continued. "Says she needs space to process everything. In truth, I think she's avoiding the social fallout." "And James?" I asked, not entirely sure I wanted to know. "Living in his condo downtown. Amanda has moved in with him." Robert's expression was unreadable. "She lost the baby. Or perhaps there never was one. James won't discuss it." I felt a pang of sympathy for Amanda, despite everything. She had been manipulated by James too, albeit in different ways than I had been. "William and Stephanie have been surprisingly supportive," Robert added. "They've invited me to dinner next week. They asked if you might join us." I was touched by the gesture but not ready for Morgan family dinners, even with the more reasonable members. "Perhaps another time," I said gently. Robert nodded in understanding. "The offer stands. Whenever you're ready." As we parted, he handed me an envelope. "This is yours," he said simply. Inside was a check for a substantial amount, along with a note that read, "Your rightful share of the business growth during your marriage. No strings attached." I tried to refuse it, but Robert was adamant. James would have hidden this money from the divorce proceedings. "Consider it my apology for not seeing who my son truly was before he hurt you." That night, alone in my new apartment, I wept for the first time since the confrontation. Not for James or the marriage I had lost, but for the years I had spent trying to be someone I wasn't, for the career I had abandoned, for the self-confidence that had been slowly eroded by a decade of subtle and not-so-subtle belittlement. The following morning, I woke to a notification from my bank. James had emptied our joint accounts overnight, taking the maximum amount he could transfer in a single transaction. Lisa had warned me this might happen, which is why we had already moved most of the funds to accounts in my name only. When I called to inform her, Lisa laughed. "He's just given us more ammunition," she said with satisfaction. "Judge Henderson will not look kindly on this." In the weeks that followed, James made several attempts to salvage his reputation and position. He gave a tearful interview to a local business magazine, claiming he had been framed by competitors jealous of his success. He tried to rally clients to his defense, only to discover that many were already transferring their portfolios to other advisors after Robert privately informed them of James's unethical practices. Catherine eventually returned from Connecticut and attempted to rehabilitate the family image through increased charitable giving and strategic social appearances. She sent me a formal letter of apology, clearly drafted by a PR consultant, which I neither responded to nor returned. The divorce proceedings moved forward with surprising speed. James, facing professional disgrace and financial scrutiny, became eager to settle quickly and quietly. With Lisa's guidance, I secured a fair division of assets, including half the value of our home, my full inheritance with interest, and a portion of James's retirement accounts equivalent to the years we were married. 3 months after our confrontation, almost to the day, I signed the final divorce papers in Lisa's office. As I placed my signature on the last page, I felt not sadness, but a profound sense of relief. The weight I had carried for 10 years was finally lifted. Lisa shook my hand formally, then surprised me with a warm hug. "You did it," she said. "Not everyone has the courage to walk away and start over." I wasn't sure if it was courage or simply self-preservation that had driven me, but as I left her office that day, I knew one thing with absolute certainty. I would never again allow anyone to make me feel less than I was. I would never again compromise my worth for acceptance or love. And the Hamilton watch? It sits on my dresser now, a reminder not of James or the marriage we had, but of the moment I reclaimed my life and my future. Some might call it petty to keep it, but I prefer to think of it as a hard-earned trophy from a battle I didn't choose but ultimately won. 3 months after serving James with divorce papers in that vintage watch box, I stood in my new apartment, surrounded by moving boxes and the few pieces of furniture I had taken from our former home. The space was small but filled with natural light, with a tiny balcony overlooking a community garden. It wasn't the luxury I had become accustomed to as Mrs. James Morgan, but it was mine. And that made it more valuable than any mansion could ever be. The divorce had been finalized with surprising efficiency. James, facing the dual crises of professional disgrace and personal scandal, had quickly agreed to my terms rather than risk a protracted court battle that would further damage his reputation. I received half the value of our home, my inheritance with interest, and a fair portion of our joint investments. Not the fortune Catherine had feared I would claim, but enough to give me solid financial footing as I rebuilt my life. With Victoria's help, I had secured a position as a marketing manager at her firm. The salary was lower than what I had earned before my marriage, but the work was challenging and fulfilling in ways I had forgotten were possible. My colleagues respected my ideas and valued my contributions. After years of James dismissing my career as a hobby, the validation was both healing and empowering. My relationship with Robert Morgan had evolved in unexpected ways. He called occasionally to check on me, and we met for coffee every few weeks. His guidance had been invaluable during the divorce proceedings, and his friendship afterward proved genuine. He had followed through on his promise to ensure I was treated fairly, even standing up to Catherine when she suggested contesting certain financial disclosures. "She's still struggling to accept everything that happened," Robert told me during one of our coffee meetings. Her entire identity was wrapped up in the perfect Morgan family image. "And how are you doing?" I asked, noticing the new lines around his eyes. "Revaluating," he answered thoughtfully. 40 years building a business and a family, only to discover I didn't really know my own son. He sighed heavily. "Catherine and I are in counseling. I'm not sure if we'll stay together, but we're trying to understand how we got here." I appreciated his honesty and the respect he showed by not sugarcoating the situation. Catherine herself had made several attempts at reconciliation, each more awkward than the last. First came the formal apology letter, clearly crafted by the family's PR team. Then a large flower arrangement delivered to my office, causing uncomfortable questions from coworkers. Finally, she invited me to lunch at her country club, an offer I politely declined. "I understand your reluctance," she had said on the phone, her voice uncharacteristically uncertain, "but I would like the opportunity to apologize in person." "I appreciate that, Catherine," I replied, "but I think we both need more time." The truth was, I wasn't sure I would ever be ready to forgive her role in James's deception. Unlike Robert, who had been genuinely unaware of his son's behavior, Catherine had actively encouraged the affair with Amanda, seeing it as an opportunity to replace me with someone she deemed more suitable for the Morgan name. News about James and Amanda trickled to me through various channels. Their relationship had deteriorated rapidly after my departure and his professional downfall. According to Megan, who heard it from Stephanie, Amanda had moved out of James's downtown condo just 6 weeks after moving in. Apparently, she didn't enjoy being with the unemployed, disgraced version of James as much as the successful, married one, Megan reported with undisguised satisfaction. James had been forced to sell his luxury car and downsize his lifestyle considerably after losing his position at Morgan Financial. Robert had offered him a path back to the firm through therapy, ethics training, and a junior position with strict oversight. But James had refused, unwilling to accept such a diminishment of his status. Instead, he had taken a position with a smaller firm in the next state, where his family name carried less weight, but also less negative association. I heard he had moved there alone, his relationship with Amanda having imploded under the pressure of public scrutiny and reduced circumstances. William and Stephanie had reached out to me several times, inviting me to dinner or family events. I was touched by their efforts to maintain a connection, but not yet ready to re-enter the Morgan social orbit, even at its periphery. I promised to stay in touch and perhaps join them when I felt more settled in my new life. My friendship with Megan had deepened through the ordeal. She had been my rock, offering her spare bedroom during the transition, helping me furnish my new apartment, and never once saying "I told you so," though she had certainly earned the right. Her unwavering support reminded me of who I had been before James, before I started dimming my light to accommodate his ego. "You know what I love most about the new Rachel?" she asked one evening as we shared wine on my tiny balcony. "You laugh again. Really laugh, not that polite society chuckle you perfected for Morgan functions." I hadn't noticed, but she was right. The tightness that had lived in my chest for years had loosened. The constant anxiety about saying or doing the wrong thing, about being Morgan material, had faded. I was rediscovering joy in small moments. A successful project at work, dinner with friends, even the simple pleasure of choosing paint colors for my apartment without considering anyone else's preferences. The Hamilton watch sat on my dresser, a reminder not of James but of my own strength. I had considered selling it but decided against it. It represented a turning point in my life, the moment I stopped accepting less than I deserved. Sometimes I wore it to important meetings, drawing confidence from its weight on my wrist. 3 months to the day after our final confrontation, I was having dinner with Megan and several friends from work when my phone rang. Unknown number. I normally wouldn't have answered, but something compelled me to step outside and take the call. "Rachel?" James's voice, once so familiar, now sounded strange and distant. "Please don't hang up." I remained silent, waiting. "I need your help," he continued, his voice uncharacteristically humble. "Amanda left. The new job isn't working out. My parents barely speak to me." He paused. "I made a mistake, Rachel. The biggest mistake of my life wasn't marrying you. It was losing you. 3 months ago, these words might have moved me. 3 months ago, I might have felt vindicated hearing James admit he was wrong. But standing outside the restaurant, listening to my former husband's desperate plea, I felt nothing but a calm certainty that this chapter of my life was truly closed. "I'm sorry, wrong number," I said quietly, and ended the call. When I returned to the table, Megan raised an eyebrow questioningly. "Nobody important," I assured her, raising my glass. "Just a ghost from the past." As we continued our dinner, surrounded by laughter and friendship, I realized that the woman who had once desperately tried to please James Morgan and his family no longer existed. In her place stood someone stronger, wiser, and finally free to create her own future, on her own terms. Have you ever experienced that moment when you realize you've outgrown a relationship that once defined you? That moment when you look back and barely recognize the person you were? I'd love to hear your stories in the comments. If this family karma story resonated with you, please hit the like button and subscribe to hear more authentic life journeys. And if you know someone who might be struggling to find their worth in a relationship, share this video with them. Sometimes, seeing someone else's path to freedom can help us find our own. Thank you for being part of my healing journey. And remember, the most beautiful gift you can give yourself is the courage to start over.